a place to hide when we knew we should, where we planned to take on the world with all its strength, with all that's life. We learn to love, we learn to cry, we learn if you run and you give up, did they hold you down long enough until you knew what you were made of?
Hi, welcome back to Wangishk International Film Festival Q&A. We're here with the amazing Jamie Kastner, and we're going to be talking about his fabulous film, There Are No Fakes. Hi, Jamie.
Thank you very much. Hi, Phyllis. Thank you.
Yeah, it was a pretty spectacular doc, and for many reasons, but one of the sort of fabulous, it's a fabulous ride because you're actually really following a story. You're actually like in real time. It's not, we're not like looking back. We're not looking at a lot of archival, whatever. You're actually in the moment. Can you tell us a little bit about how this project started and then the evolution of all that you found on your journey?
Sure. Thank you again for those kind words of introduction from an esteemed filmmaker in her own right. This story came to me quite randomly. I knew Kevin Hearn, one of the guy who gets the whole ball rolling, from high school. And not only has he since become a member of the Bare Naked Ladies, but he also performed with Lou Reed for about 7 years. And I had approached him soon after Lou Reed's death, after Lou Reed's death, which I believe was in 2013, about possibly doing some kind of Lou Reed project together, because we had in fact played in a band in high school in which we played all Lou Reed songs. And then he goes on to play with Lou Reed. How irritating is that? Like I wasn't
Really
irritating. Anyway, that was not in the cards at the time, but he said, I'm involved in this other story that might interest you. And he called up a newspaper piece that had been written about his case at the time. And then he told me the bare bones of the story. And even though I was hearing it from someone I knew, it just sounded unbelievable. It was an unreal sounding story. The twists and turns and the macabre goings on and crazy characters and so on. And the next step was to have a call with his lawyer, who filled in more detail. And even though I was speaking, as I say, to two kind of credible people, I just couldn't believe it. And I made it clear, as we have to do, that even though we knew each other, he wasn't going to have any creative control over the film,
Right.
and he'd have to be in it and just leave me to it. And they were fine with that, and and it was only then I got my own research team going, and we began to find. I had great access to half the story through Kevin and his lawyer and all the research they and a bunch of their behind the scenes people had done for many years on this question of fakes. However, I had to, make my own way. My team and I had to make our own way with the other side of the story. And I was determined, as I told Kevin from the outset, that this be a balanced story. I felt it would be stronger that way, rather than just seeming like a diatribe from one side. And so, and as I started to get my first interviews with so there's the issue of a trove of 3,000. Well, I guess people see in the film, right? So there's the issue of the fakes and whether they are or are not fakes, as the title somewhat winkingly suggests. And as soon as I began to get my interviews with the other side, let's call them, not Kevin's side, and bring them back to the edit suite. I worked with a wonderful editor named Michael Hannon. I don't know if you've worked with him any,
I know.
but great editor, and a pretty low key guy, not given to great emotional outbursts. And as he saw this material start to roll in, he said, "Holy fuck!" And then I came back from the next interview, and that elicited another such response. And
Say it
and
again.
pardon me,
Say it again.
holy holy fuck, I'm trying to do his deadpan. And the and this is what we then tried to recreate for the audience, basically was a series of holy fuck moments as we experienced wading into this, and getting, it was just more and more incredible at every step.
It's interesting because, absolutely, there are so many of those moments. And if you pitched that as a narrative show, the
Yeah,
broadcaster would say, "There's no way that guy could be like, there is no, that's not believable. That would
that's right.
never happen. That creepy, weird dude is not real. Back him off." And
It's
why?
operatic. It's like the people being found dead with paint on their clothes. I don't even know if that detail made it into the film. There was so much, but I mean, it was like, 'cause I heard this stuff. It's indeed, if you made it up, it would be too fantastical. That's right.
So um, how did you structure sort of the like the going out and shooting, or were you always in the moment, or did you know in advance this guy was going to be dead with paint on him? Like, how did you?
I had a sense, as I say, from the very beginning of what the scope of the story was, but I
Right.
swear I didn't believe it until I went and got in there myself and started encountering these characters and hearing these stories. And I did wind up finding stuff that went beyond, finding out stuff, in the making of the film, that went beyond even what I had initially been told. And of course, even having been told it from one person, it's just hearsay, and you've got to go and get the prime people primarily involved. So there was still a lot of doing and a lot of surprises along the way. In terms of structuring the shooting, I mean, I I I knew, as I say, I had access to a certain, one side of the story through Kevin and his allies, but a number of those people are, in fairly vulnerable
Yeah.
situations, and as you know from making this kind of film, it's it's one thing for a third party to say, oh yeah, they'll be in the film, and it's another person, you have to build your own relationship, and then you believe it once you've got it in the can, kind of thing. So I knew that, if we're talking about an art fraud ring, I knew that you needed the first hand accounts of that, and those were among the first interviews I shot, because it was touch and go, even in my own
Yeah.
conversations with a couple of those people, whether it was going to happen. So as soon as they said yes, got on a plane to Thunder Bay, and got in, got out. And I've done at least one other film kind of like this. It was in the Caribbean, called The Skyjacker's Tale, about
Mhm.
crazy crime in a far-flung place, let's say. And there was a number of parallels, actually, of people's behavior far from the center and far from what they figure are watching eyes, and their people's appalling behavior. And in the process of filming, it also makes you nervous, as an outsider going into that place, and knowing that what this person is testifying to on camera could get him and her, in some cases, and you, into a whole world of shit,
Right.
with who knows who, with the cops, with gangs, with, so and wasn't that long ago that I was making films about disco, you know and Gloria Gaynor was my biggest concern, how to appease her. So
Well,
I
she
am,
broke up. Yeah.
and she was scary in her own way, but not
Yeah.
not that way. Not like life and death scary.
No.
But so I kind of got in, got out quick, for those things, and you wonder about, yeah, surveillance and all sorts of stuff. So
Well, yeah, I
I,
mean, that was what was so remarkable. What was really holy fuck, as you said, was that they're doing they do bad things and they have no problem talking. Like it's like so how
Well,
did you formulate the questions? Like how did you get to that with these kind of
well,
strange characters?
I knew that I would have to, as I say, my background is as a journalist, and I knew that it would be stronger. It would be, even though I was going to structure it dramatically like a
Right.
thriller, that the multiple points of view would be part of the engine that would
Mhm.
propel it forward. And I also knew, that if I could persuade people on both sides to talk, everybody believes that he or she,
Mhm.
has a story to tell, has a point, is justified in their point of view. The audience may see someone as crazy. That person themselves, more likely than not, does not. So they think their point of view is reasonable, and
Right.
they have a case. And I felt it was very important to give people a fair shake to make their case. And this had been a feud that had been going on for well over a decade, with lots of players and sprawling sub cases and all sorts of things that are touched on in the film. So that and the up until this film's release, the other side was had the upper hand. They had won the court cases, and they so why shouldn't they want to crow about it now? I did feel it was important strategically to try to get the most of the key interviews. I knew that Kevin's trial would be a kind of narrative
Right.
framework,
Yeah.
and that was ongoing. We didn't know what the result would be.
Right.
And but that was kind of, yeah, that opened the door to tell the whole story of how everybody got there. And in fact, since we are not allowed to film in courtrooms in Canada, and I did actually try to film in this court case and was turned down, but once rather sternly by a bailiff or whatever. The I tried to recreate the case in the film, with essentially, the audience as the jury kind of thing. But I felt it was important to get those interviews in the can before the trial happened,
Yeah.
because after the trial happened, one side would be feeling smug and victorious, and the other side would be angry and defeated. And getting
Exactly.
it beforehand, they
Yeah.
both were motivated to make their best case, and
Yeah.
there was something at stake. So that was the other way I went about it.
So how did you, because it's yeah, like you said, it's like woven like this sort of mystery. How did you and your cinematographer kind of come to, visual language, or how did you decide how you wanted to shoot it, or did it happen again also in the moment because there's so much verite?
I mean, I guess we were. I had worked with the same great cinematographer, Derek Rogers. We've done a number of films together, and we had done the Skyjacker's Tale, the one I was mentioning, right before this, and that one wound up having a look that I kind of described as like tropical noir. And so for this one, I had in mind, I just had loose references in mind. I wasn't, doctrinaire about it or anything,
Yeah,
because yeah, you are just watching things unfold. But I had Northern Noir in mind. I had
right.
Fargo in mind.
There's
There were funny characters and of that ilk, in at least the first half of the film, and then it's not so funny anymore. But so I had those kind of films. Some of the Scandinavian series, what's the bridge, I watched,
yeah,
beautiful drone shots and stuff of this desolate kind of a Scandinavian landscape. So I had that kind of stuff vaguely in mind. I didn't set out to. You kind of find what's right for each character. Some situations you can control more than others,
right.
and then you get up to Thunder Bay in the middle of winter, and it's quite striking. While you can bear to be outside, and I know that's not even seriously north by some standards, but for a wuss from Toronto, it was pretty far north. And there is you know, you're thinking about the themes of the story, and you're thinking this is the place that happened, and it has a mood. Thunder Bay definitely has a mood. And we just try to
What,
capture it.
when did you know you had more than you thought you did? And did your, like, your sort of your point of view change on who you thought was a certain way and who actually you didn't like and you came to like, or you didn't believe but then you believed? Like, how did that bend and shift for you as a filmmaker?
Well, I mean, it I guess I'm a bit of a whore during the interview process, in that I can sincerely, I mean, you're in a room with people and they're paying you. No, I'm kidding. And they
Which is a good.
your job is to draw them out, right? And
Yes,
there is
it is.
humanity in everybody, and they all have their own point of view, and it is my job to sympathize with them, you know, like a shrink or a defense lawyer, or I guess
Yeah,
what I mentioned. uh, um, but I genuinely do also. I mean, you know, at least for the duration of that thing, I'm not there like conning them. I'm really, I'm listening, you know, maybe they feel I am ultimately, but you know, I'm listening to them, and I am in many cases, you know, they're people are not stupid. They're not, you know, maybe they're
yeah.
crooks. Maybe they just believe their side so completely
Mhm.
you know, so I'm often surprised actually by how sympathetic people. I've gone in hearing one side of the story. I then have to, you know, that drew me into it, and you know, then I have to go about it with a genuine openness, because I think that's the way to get people to put their guard down. But also, I have to be prepared to be persuaded and be open to different, you know,
Yeah,
coming to different conclusions. I mean, I'll tell you, for instance, when I the lawyer who's the main lawyer on the other side, Brian Schiller, who is a partner of Clay Ruby's, actually a well-known, right, a
yeah,
civil rights lawyer. I think maybe he's retired now, but anyway, and Schiller is his civil partner or something like that. Anyway, he's a very, actually an extremely persuasive, charming guy in person. I mean, you can see why he is so good in court, and we really hit it off, actually. And I thought, gee, are we going to be able to be friends after this film comes out? I don't know. And the but I liked him, and he was quite persuasive, and I came away from the interview thinking I thought it was going to be one thing, and I don't know if I got anything that I expected in that thing. That guy was so slick and good and genuinely persuasive that I'm not sure he's going to be, you know, the counterpoint that I felt dramatically I
right.
expected, you know, from the lawyer on the other side. But then this is the beauty of editing, you know, not even trick editing, just it's the difference between a live performance, like a courtroom, like a setting like a courtroom, and the edit suite where you can really, for the sake of clarity, you have, right, as you know, you have to go over things and go over things and pare down and focus and focus and focus and really get to the nut of what the
Yeah.
guy is saying. And when you get to the nut of the guy, of what the guy is saying, I mean, for Brian Schiller in
Mhm.
particular, for instance, and this is the beauty of the close-up also, you know, it's so revealing. You know, he can say about Kevin Hearn, the guy on the other side of the courtroom, he was a gentleman, and the tone in which he says that says it all. He was a gentleman, you know.
Yeah.
He, you know, he's Reddy's really calling him is quite the opposite, you know. So and it's not like I've had more difficult interviews to edit. I interviewed Pat Buchanan once a long time ago. That was one slick motherfucker, let me tell you.
Right.
But Brian Schiller, you know, you didn't take any trickery. You just have to cut away all the qualifying and all the
Mhm.
understanding the other side to really get to what he's saying, and then he winds up delivering. Anyway, it was a fascinating process in that regard, and endless surprises and endless challenges in putting it together. It was not, you know.
Oh no, I can imagine I wondered about, did anyone get attached? Did you find the relationships extended past Lock Picture or while you were going? And did any of the characters or people in your film want to see how you cut them? Were they interested in, did you allow that? How did you sort of manage expectations?
There were so
Oh,
it
and
was
criminals. How did you manage criminals in
how
that
do we
with
manage
that?
criminals? With a lawyer. Several lawyers. The many people on both sides had second thoughts after doing. I mean, actually, some of the people who asked to review the footage or asked to take things out or asked, were actually nervous people who were on the right side, or what we might say.
Sure.
Hey, I guess my sympathies are obvious by the end. On the they were allied with Morisot. They were on that side of the fence, but they had suffered so much already in the decade prior to this film, having had their livelihoods and their careers and their reputations viciously attacked, that they really were very gun shy. It was hard to get people even on that side to come on camera. So even from maybe unexpectedly, given that in hindsight we might say, well, they were on the right side of history, they were there was a lot of nervousness, tough interviews, and a lot of misgivings afterwards. However, everybody signed a release and nobody got to either see nor revise. I mean, I tried to handle that as nicely as possible, but I'm absolutely firm on that.
Yeah.
And in terms of relationships beyond, I mean, yes, I have been in touch with both sides beyond I understand I have been characterized not that nicely on the Goldies websites. I don't look at them, but in fact, I think many of them were taken down following a court order of yet another battle between Kevin Hearn's lawyer and them. um, and I think they're on the lam somewhere, actually, because there's a warrant outstanding for their arrest. So there's that. um, but I absolutely, the only people I gave an advantage. Well, Kevin cleverly volunteered his services as a composer for this film, and you
Mhm.
can't turn down otherwise unattainable talent like that. It was sneaky of him because he did get to see cuts of the film once it was close to completion. He still had no say, but he got to see it a little bit ahead of time. I did show it to Dallas and Amanda,
Okay.
the
Yeah.
protagonists from the second half of the film, before just about before anybody, because of course they're such incredibly brave people. They had agreed to appear in the film and say what they said at considerable personal risk.
Yeah.
And so I did feel, even though we never had any such agreement, I did feel beholden to them to make sure that they were happy with the way they were portrayed, and they were, and they didn't request any changes, which I took as a huge compliment. But as a rule, I never ever do follow the usual hard ass journalistic rules of you never pay for interviews, never
Exactly.
never allow anybody to review anything. They trust you or they don't, and that's it.
Um, did
The criminals, I mean, you asked, I couldn't get Gary. I tried to get Gary Lamont in the film. I tried to get his wife Linda Kachik in the
Yeah.
film. I did speak on the phone with her once or twice, but it was not to be. Did that imply that they're criminals, what I just said? Anyway, I mean, Gary's name has been, I think the decision was made. It's a kind of insurance lawyer question, right? The decision was made that he has been publicly implicated in many crimes already, and it's already been written up in many places, and so it's sort of out there, part of the public record, that these I mean, he's in jail, so they convicted of crime,
right.
so there's that. I mean, I did, as I say, I did try to contact him. I would have been happy to have his point of view in the film too, maybe a whole other film, a whole second part if one could get him, but he didn't to respond. And yeah, Linda, the decision. I think she is one of the only people, maybe whose face is blurred in the film, and that was, based on the fact that such accusations have not widely been made about her, but
Right.
it's one of those saw off things.
So I have a comment from audience
Yes.
named Melissa Caillou. When you ask your questions during an interview, aside from the questions you already have, do you get more ideas of what kinds of questions you would like to ask in your interviews as you go? And also, have you experienced anyone who didn't want to be interviewed during your interview? Did any of the characters in your film start to be interviewed and then decline halfway through or afterwards?
Um, Certainly to the first part, and you were starting to ask that as well, Phyllis. I mean, it's I go in with a list of questions. I have a sense of what areas, you know, you go with a long list, you know, of what areas of the story this particular person can speak to, even though knowing in the editing, you know, you don't need to have every single person speaking every single part of the story, and you might, you know, wind up, but you just don't know what you're going to get in a documentary, so you cast a wide net. You know, and sometimes it's you structure it strategically. You know, certain issues are going to be touchy, and you don't want to get people's back up too early, and you want a spontaneous response when you want it. And if they do walk out, you know, you want to know you have X in the can as opposed to that much. Uh, um, if you know it's gonna get controversial. Um, in this case, you know, there were people who refused to be interviewed. I tried to interview the Goldies, and we crossed paths a few times. And well, you can see her telling the camera to fuck off. That became the nature of our encounters. But well, no, they didn't start any more civilly like that than that. They started with them threat when they even heard wind of me making a film about Morrisseau without knowing any more about it than that. They went to the CEO of the broadcaster and threatened to picket her office. So that was how that relationship began, and I never did get them on camera, other than telling the camera to fuck off, which is kind of all you really need to know about them at the end of
Yeah.
the day anyway, in addition to what everybody else says. So there were people I wanted to get, like them and Gary Lamont and Linda, who I was unable to get. I felt that you got enough of a picture of from other firsthand accounts of them, the firsthand being, you know, key, that the film could stand without that. Nobody in this film, in terms of my overall history, yeah, Pat Buchanan did in a previous film did cut an interview short and kick me out of his house. However, I did persuade him to sign a release on my way out the door, and I pissed off the village people in my in my disco film. The guy who portrays the Native American, I believe he is actually part Native American, strangles me on camera in the closing credits of the film, but playfully. The you know, but in this film, which is actually infinitely more controversial, the surprise, well, it's an interesting lesson in the extent to which people, as I said before, just want to voice their own opinions. They don't see
Yeah.
them as unreasonable. And Joe Otavnik, for instance, has been in touch with me a couple of times. You know, he's complaining that he didn't get interviewed on Studio 2. Oh, he did try to. It looked like he was going to serve me with legal papers at the premiere of the film at Hot Docs last year, and then the audience booed him out. That was fun. Um, but other than that, I mean, the huge blowback, I imagine, did not really come to pass for one reason or another. The film has been very positively received, and no one walked out of an interview.
It's funny how that happens. I have to say, we're just going to wrap up, but I think it was really one of the best films at Hot Docs last year. I really, really loved your film,
Close
and
second to yours, thank you.
and what's your just very quickly? What's your next project?
Well, I have a couple on the horizon. One is a sort of whistleblower sort of mass surveillance story, and a very interesting, somewhat murky character in the midst of that milieu. And another is a kind of unconventional housing crisis story involving what I see as a kind of Downton Abbey like a tale about a very high end apartment building in Toronto. Um,
Well, that sounds like fun.
world's smallest violin. No, it's more than that, actually, but obviously. So yeah, it's a different direction. I mean, in some ways, yeah, as I'm sure you've experienced as well, you dip your toe into something and it could go on and on, but I don't know.
Mhm.
Yeah, I mean, I feel like there could be 8 parts in the stories that are the offshoot of this, but could I live to tell them? I don't
Yeah,
know.
and would you want to go back? I mean, that's always the big question, I think. Um, well, thank you so much for sharing There Are No Fakes with the Wingish International Film Festival. And if beyond the festival, what distribution do you have for the film?
Well, in Canada, the film had a kind of art house theatrical run in association with Mongrel Media, and it's premiered on TVO, and it is available on their website, and I think it's still on iTunes if you really want to pay for it, even though you can get it for free. Um, in the U.S., actually, it's just come out on Amazon Prime in the States, and and it's sold apart from that to a few countries internationally. The Scandinavians, I guess they like the look of it after all.
Yeah, exactly. They're like, hey, that's the bridge. No, I'm just kidding. Anyway, Jamie, we got to wrap it up, but thank you so much. It's
Thank
really
you
nice
very much.
to virtually meet you,
Yeah,
and
likewise. Hope
look
to.
forward to meeting you in person
Thank
after
you.
we can't contaminate each other.
Okay, it's a date, and thanks to the festival for inviting the film. Really nice talking to you.
Okay, talk to you soon.
Okay,
Bye.
bye.